Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March 11th, 2021 teleconference meeting of the Memphis and Shelby County Land Use Control Board. My name is Mary Sharp, and I will be serving as your chairperson today. We will begin this morning's meeting with a roll call. Mr. Whitehead, would you proceed, please?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Fleming.
Here.
Mr. Gill.
Here.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace.
Here.
Ms. O'Connell.
Here.
Dr. Pritchard.
Here.
Mr. Thomas. Mr. Tolles.
Here.
Ms. Wilbanks.
Here.
Mr. McKinnon.
Here.
Mr. Thomas. And Chair Sharp.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Everyone should already have a copy of today's agenda for this March 11th, 2021 Land Use Control Board telephonic meeting. Anyone who wishes to be a speaker on today's agenda has already filled out the attendance speaker's card, and it is in the hands of Mr. Whitehead or his staff. When it comes time for you to speak, he or his staff will call your name and will unmute you at the appropriate time for you to speak. Please wait about 10 seconds before speaking so you can be properly unmuted and so that we can hear all of your remarks. At this point, I would like to read our conflict of interest statement. The adopted policy of the Land Use Control Board requires that any member of the board recuse himself or herself from any participation in the discussion or voting on any matter on the meeting's agenda in which he or she may have direct or indirect personal interest. The members shall in this teleconference let us know verbally they are recusing themselves. During deliberation on any matter from which they have recused themselves, an abstention may substitute for a recusal for the purposes of maintaining a quorum. I would now like to get the approval of our minutes from the Land Use Control Board February meeting. May I please have a motion?
Chairman Sharp, this is Libby. I move that we accept the minutes as mailed out.
Thank you. I have a second?
Second.
Vice Chair?
Ms. Wilbanks, I think.
Wilbanks. So, have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. An individual vote on this, or all in favor?
Let's just do all in favor.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, say nay. Motion carries. Okay. We don't have a director's report today. Mr. Zena is not here with us. So, Mr. Whitehead, may I please get a secretary's report for this month and an explanation of today's procedures?
Yes, ma'am. And since you and I are about to go through our short speeches, what I'll ask Mr. Penzis to do is, if he doesn't mind, trying to identify the board member who is calling from a phone with a particular level of feedback. And once we identify that person, we will try to unmute you at the pertinent times throughout the meeting during discussion. But we find that there's always at least one member of the board that, and it changes. It's Ma Bell. She has a funny way about doing things. So, my secretary's report. If you're listening, obviously you're on the call, but you can also view visuals related to the presentations. Those visuals are being streamed live on YouTube on our channel, which is youtube.com/C as in channel, /Division of Planning and Development. If you have a copy of the agenda, at least a digital copy of the agenda, there's a link to that page on the agenda. If you need a copy of the agenda and online, Mr. Penzis, you're still hard at work. If you need a copy of the agenda, you can go to our homepage, which is Memphis and Shelby County Land Use Control Board, or just Land Use Control Board on any search engine, and you'll find a link to the most recent agenda. Madam Chair, as we have discussed, I think for the last couple months, we're now ready. We've notified the public during our early notification processes that our April meeting will be the first where we will meet at 9. So this will be our last 9:30 meeting until we decide to change it again. And now I will get to my script. At the beginning of today's meeting, we will establish a consent agenda for those items where no one in the audience or on the board is requesting an individual public hearing. After that consent agenda is established and approved, we will move on to the regular agenda. For each case on the regular agenda, staff will give a presentation. This will be followed by the applicant's presentation and any testimony from supporters. The applicant and the supporters are given 10 total minutes. For each speaker, the chair will ask board members if they have any questions for that speaker. Following that, we'll hear from opposition, again for a total of 10 minutes. And the chair will ask, while those members of the public have the floor, if any member of the board has any questions for them. Following those two 10-minute time periods, we'll go to the applicant for a 3-minute rebuttal period, if he or she chooses to utilize that. Following all the presentations and after all parties have been heard, the chair will ask the board for any additional questions of those people in the public, and then close the public hearing, followed by that will be done by making a motion and second, then the body will deliberate. All motions made by this body are made in the affirmative. If a board member wishes to hear additional testimony, we'll need a 2/3 vote to reopen testimony. We will hear from both sides. The chair will endeavor to make sure both sides are given an equal amount of time to provide that additional testimony. Then a new motion to approve will be made, and then we'll close the public hearing again. With that, Madam Chair, I was going to go over the list of possible potential items for the consent calendar, and for specific matters, I was going to explain why we have, at least on 2 cases, a consent as a hold. Okay, so item number 1, which is our resolution that we will meet. Yes.
Show
yes.
me here.
Mr. Thomas is here. Thank you. Item number 1, which is our telephonic resolution for the next 2 months, can be on consent. Number 2 can be placed on consent. Number 3, the applicant needs an additional 1-month hold, so that would be consent as a hold. Number 4 is the same, a consent as a hold, and I wanted to explain, especially on this one, the purpose of the additional hold. First and foremost, this body is probably well aware that there is a 3-month limitation on holds found throughout the Unified Development Code that governs most of our operations here. Planned developments have a 3-month hold limitation, rezonings, special use permits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is not bound by that 3-month limitation are establishments of historic districts. So we are going to go past the 3-month hold, but there's nothing in our UDC or the Tennessee Code annotated that would prohibit that. So why are we requesting a hold? If you recall, there is one large undeveloped tract in this proposed historic district, and the current owner, the city of Memphis, struck a compromise with the applicants for this historic district by which there would be some conditions added to the planned development that would eventually be processed for that undeveloped tract, where the initial hearing or the initial review by the Landmarks Commission would be partially waived, but then applied later on. Well, if you noticed in our staff report just this past Friday, we did receive an opinion from our attorney, Robert Rowing, who seems to confirm the general procedure we have followed in the past, which is that planned developments cannot supersede a historic district. His reasoning was that historic districts are created pursuant to state law, and planned developments are created pursuant to city law, the zoning code, and so the latter cannot trump the former. With that, Mr. Young, who is representing the city on this project, has worked with the applicants for this historic district on an additional 1-month hold to brainstorm other ways to address this potential conflict and to prevent any conflict. So that's the reason behind that hold. Mr. Penzis, are you still working on the feedback? And if it's me, please just say it so, and I'll call from a different phone. Number 5, consent as a hold, and I'll give you the reason on this one too. We are asking the applicant to at least have some initial conversations with TDEC. TDEC is the entity, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, that reviews innovative is one word, unusual is another, sanitary sewer control devices. And I say it's unusual because it's not gravity flow sanitary sewer. It's going to be more of a individualized package plant. Because that's very unusual, and because this county has had a mixed experience with those, we want the applicant to go ahead and get with TDEC before they receive their entitlement, their zoning entitlement, which is the matter that's before you. So that's number 5. Number 6 we'll hear. Number 7, 8, and 9 are consent as approval. Number 10 is consent as a hold, and I know we have a lot of callers on number 10, so let me explain number 10. Number 10 is a request to modify one of the conditions of approval of this planned development here at Poplar and Highland. That condition of approval, back from 1990, that's PD 90-344, prohibited drive-through restaurants, or restaurants with the drive-through window. This plan development was also conditioned upon Land Use Control Board site plan review. So the request here is to address the condition and to waive the condition that prohibits drive-in or drive-through restaurants, and then once that is achieved, to then submit a site plan for a specific user. Now, the body has the ability to vote if and when that same bifurcated request comes to you. This body is perfectly within its right to say, we don't want to waive the condition related to drive-through restaurants until we see a site plan. Now, we have shared that with the applicant, and the applicant says, well, we can't get the lessee that we want, lessor, lessee, until we have the entitlement. Well, it's a catch-22, I guess. If that is the case, and we are still at this place in 1 month from now at our April meeting, then I think the applicant has already brainstormed ways to add conditions that would ameliorate some of the concerns. So when a site plan does come in that meets all of those conditions, let's just say, extra landscaping, et cetera, that would be one way to address this bifurcated question. Now, I think I speak on behalf of most people, applicant included probably, that it would be really, really awesome if this wasn't bifurcated and was one request. Modify the condition and also show us your site plan. But there's the story on number 10. Number 11, we're going to hear. Number 12, that is a consent as a hold. the neighborhood meeting was held within 10 days of this meeting, so it's a little bit of a technicality, but technicalities sometimes involve a hold. So we anticipate it being on consent next month, but they had a technical issue there. Number 13 we'll hear. Number 14 and 15, consent as approval. Number 16, we have a consent as a hold. The mailed notices did not go out, and I believe the site plan needs more massaging. Number 17, again, there's some site plan massaging that needs to happen on number 17. So 16 and 17, consent as a hold. Number 18, we're going to hear. Number 19 is consent as approval. And, Madam Chair, finally, number 20, we're going to hear.
So much, Mr. Whitehead. Land Use Control Board is a supporter of community involvement, and we welcome neighborhood comments and feedback. We are respectful of the fact that many of you have taken off work, adjusted work schedules, or adjusted your schedule even if you're still at home to be heard today via telephone. But we ask that your comments please be made within the time frame allowed. If there are multiple speakers, please try not to be repetitive with your side's limited time. Lastly, I'd like to ask all of you to silence your cell phones so as not to interrupt or disturb anyone during today's proceedings, as these can still be heard if you are unmuted via this teleconference. We're now ready to move to the consent agenda. With our procedures now explained, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Lisa Wilbanks, who will be this morning's consent agenda chairperson. Ms. Wilbanks will read those items 1 through 20, which will be on the consent agenda. Those items where requests have been made for a public hearing will not be placed on the consent, except for those cases that will be held in abeyance until future meetings. Ms. Wilbanks, would you proceed, please?
Yes, ma'am. Item number 1, resolution of the Land Use Control Board that continuation of meeting telephonically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Memphis and Shelby County in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, pursuant to Section A1 of Governor Lee's Executive Order Number 78. Item number 2, case SUP 20-017 in Midtown. The request is a special use permit to allow administrative offices and a resource center for medical services for Well Child Incorporated at 657 and 659 Philadelphia Street and 680, 687, and 688 New York Street. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 3, case PD 21-006 in South Memphis. The request is a restaurant with the sale of alcoholic beverages at 969 East McLemore. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 4, case CDHD in Crosstown. The request is the establishment of the Crosstown Historic Overlay District. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 5, case MJR 21-001 in Eads. The request is a major modification to allow a clubhouse facility in 4 apartment buildings with accessory structures and uses in Area A for 260-unit apartment development at the south side of US 64, plus or minus 897.2 feet east of Reed Hooker Road. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 7, case MJR 21-005 in Southeast Memphis. The request is a major modification to allow vehicle rental facility in Area A3 at the east side of Centennial Drive, plus or minus 475 feet north of Winchester Road. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 8, case MJR 21-006 in Hillshire. The request is a modification to access requirements for a gas station at the southeast corner of Reese and Appling. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 9, case MJR 21-007 at Thousand Oaks. The request is a modification to allow adult care for veterans and accessory supportive services, multifamily, and offices at 2625 Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 10, case MJR 21-008 at Poplar Highland. Request is the modification to uses to allow a restaurant with a drive-through window at 3424 Poplar. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 12, case S21-007 in Whitehaven. The request is a major subdivision to allow 6 lots for construction of new single-family homes at the east side of Auburn Road, plus or minus 969 feet south of Craft Road. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 14, case S21-009 on South Main. The request is a 15-lot major subdivision at the southwest corner of South Main and Carolina. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 15, case PD 21-001 in Southeast Memphis. The request is a new Dollar General store at 6659 Quince Road. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 16, case PD 21-003 in South Memphis. The request is an 18-unit apartment complex at 751 St. Paul Avenue. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 17, case PD 21-004 in Southeast Memphis. The request is a multifamily residential community on the south side of Quince, east of Riverdale. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 19, case SUP 21-005 in Raleigh. The request is a cell tower at 3695 Austin Peay. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions, and that is our consent agenda.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilbanks. The items on the consent agenda will now be voted on with one vote, subject to the recommendation of OPD. If the consent agenda is approved, only items number 6, 11, 13, 18, and 20 will be heard. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes, ma'am. Move to approve item number 1, item number 2, case SUP 20-017, item number 3, case PD 21-006, item number 4, case CTHD, item number 5, case MJR 21-001, item number 7, case MJR 5, item number 8, case MJR 21-006, item number 9, case MJR 21-007, item number 10, case MJR 21-008, item number 12, case 21-007, item number 14, case S 21-009, item number 15, case PD 21-001, item number 16, case PD 21-003, item number 17, case PD 21-004, and item number 19, case SUP 21-005.
Thank you, Ms. Wilbanks. Do I hear a second?
Second. Pritchard.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pritchard. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. Individual vote. Mr. White.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Mr. Gill.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Aye.
Ms. O'Connell.
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Tolles.
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
10 ayes.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. We will now hear number 6, number 11, number 13, number 18, and number 20. I'm going to go to the regular agenda. Dr. Pritchard will read the item number and the case number for our regular agenda.
Agenda item number 8, MJR 21-004. This is a correspondence to PD 03-328 Northeast Memphis, modification to allow auto repair and tire sales on the west side of Sycamore View, south of Raleigh-LaGrange. Staff recommendation is rejection.
Okay, thank you. That's item number 6. Since
Yes.
that is a rejection, then we are ready to hear the staff report.
Madam Chair, this is Jeffrey Pence with Planning and Development. I actually don't see the applicant or their representative on the call for this one at the moment.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, what we could do is roll it a few cases down, and if that's still the case, what we do is we send a letter saying, hey, you didn't show up. If you do that again, we'll consider your case withdrawn. So I guess what we should do right now is go ahead and go to number 11.
11.
Okay,
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard?
Yes. Agenda item number 11. And I've written over it, so I don't know what the first digit is. 21-006, Normal Station, 2-lot major subdivision at 770 Eccles. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchard. Okay, this one has opposition, so we will listen for the staff report.
Yes, Madam Chair. Jeffrey Penzis, Planning and Development. So the applicant is Lakesh Nandaraj. The location is 770 Eccles Avenue, and the request is a two-lot re-subdivision. Next slide, please. So the location is in Normal Station. Next slide, please. So the current zoning is residential single-family 6, and the area is primarily surrounded by single-family zoning, and there's some multifamily, and there's a commercial use at the southwest corner of Eccles and Douglas. Next slide, please. So these are just some site photos of the subject property, and then across the street from the subject property. Next slide, please. And these are just looking north and south from the subject property down Eccles. Next slide, please. So this is the Dye subdivision from 1959, and essentially this is why it's a re-subdivision, because this was an approved subdivision. It's Lot 1. Next slide, please. So this is the preliminary plan. Essentially, it's just to divide the lot in half. And note there was already a Board of Adjustment action approved for the lot width on both lots. They are 40.5 feet approximately. And also one of the lots is slightly under the required minimum of 6,000 square feet at 5,300 some square feet. Next slide, please. So when looking at Memphis 3.0, this request meets the Memphis 3.0 is consistent with it essentially because the use is single-family residential and the anchor neighborhood for this area is primarily single unit. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the subdivision is compatible and in keeping with the character of development in the neighborhood and conforms with all applicable provisions and requirements of the Unified Development Code. Next slide, please. And with that, staff recommends approval with conditions. And while the contextual infill standards did not technically apply to this subdivision, staff has felt that they would be appropriate, so I have conditioned several of them as such as seen here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Penzis. Board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Penzis? Hearing none, we're ready for the applicant, Mr. McCaskill, or can't pronounce that second name, but whomever is ready to speak. And we will be timed by our Vice Chair, Ms. Lyles Wallace.
Yeah, that's okay, Ms. Sharp. This is Tim McCaskill, 7891 Stage Hills Boulevard. We're in agreement with the staff recommendation. As Mr. Penzis said, we were approved by the Board of Adjustment last month for a variance for lot size on one lot and lot width from the 45-foot required width to 40.5 feet for the two lots. Subdividing lots in this neighborhood has become pretty commonplace, especially on Eccles. Within our same block, there's a 3-lot re-subdivision that was approved in 2015 north of our site. In the next block to the north, there was also a 3-lot re-subdivision approved in 2019. And directly across the street, there's an 8-lot planned development that has been approved. We think this re-subdivision is really in keeping with other developments in this neighborhood, and hope you'll agree with us on that, and we'll save the rest of our time for the rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. Board members, you have any questions of Mr. McCaskill at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to hear from the opposition. Ms. Saunders.
Hi, this is Linda Fox. I'm at 708 Watson, and I am the current president of the Normal Station Neighborhood Association. As always, we appreciate our opportunity to get to voice our opinion about developments that are happening in our neighborhood. Overall, our concern is kind of twofold. One is that there is this now overriding concept that anyone can come in and buy a lot in Normal Station and subdivide it, because as Mr. McGaskill said, kind of the word that is getting out there is this is in keeping with what's happening in the neighborhood. So what's happening from our point of view is that all the lots that are of a good size, that someone can have one house and enjoy a little bit of a yard, are being turned into very squeezed, living conditions where the houses are very close together. And that always brings up parking issues, which is a big issue in our neighborhood. The second thing that we had concerns with after meeting with the developer was just his lack of experience. There's no plan. There's nothing for us to look at in terms of what the house is going to look like, what the architectural style will be, where the parking is going to be. I see here, I had not had an opportunity to see the staff recommendation before it was put up on the screen, but it says that a parking pad located between the front facade of the principal dwelling unit and the street is prohibited. I'm not sure, where that rule comes from, because there are several in our neighborhood where there are the horseshoe parking, horseshoe driveways, which is one of the things that we talked about with the developer. And there are some very attractive parking pads. I think part of the restriction might have been because the old plumbing that runs underneath some of the yards. So overall, hopefully, our hope is that this will be a lovely development, but we do feel that our neighborhood is kind of getting squeezed by developers who could build one house on this lot and make a profit, but in the interest of a greater profit, they're going to put two houses. So that's the neighborhood view. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Ms. Saunders. Board members, do you have any questions of Ms. Saunders at this time? Okay, hearing none. Mr. McCaskill, we're ready for your rebuttal.
Yes, I'd like to answer Ms. Saunders' concern about the parking spaces. The Unified Development Code requires parking spaces to be outside of the front setback. In other words, they have to be beside the house and not in front of the house. If it's a one or two bedroom building, one space is required. If it's more than two bedrooms, then two spaces are required. That also leaves room in the driveway between the house and the street for any guest parking. So we don't anticipate any on-street parking because we'll have parking on site. The existing house is almost 100 years old. It's in really bad shape. It needs to be demolished. So that has to be done anyway. We had a neighborhood meeting, and Ms. Saunders and her attorney were the only participants at the meeting, so I don't see a whole lot of opposition to this case besides them. We think this will be an improvement. The two new homes will be nicer than a lot of the homes around it, and we just hope you see that and vote for approval of this case.
Thank you, Mr. McCaskill. Board members, you have any questions of either Mr. McCaskill or Ms. Saunders at this time? Hearing none, then I'm going to close the public portion of this meeting. Dr. Pritchard.
Move approval of agenda item number 11, 521-006, Normal Station.
Can I get a second? Okay, that's Ms. Wilbanks with the second. Okay, is there any discussion? Is there any discussion amongst the board members? Hearing none, I'm assuming we're ready to vote individually. Mr. Whitehead.
Ms. Wilbanks.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard.
Yes.
Vice Chair Laus-Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Tolles.
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Gill,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes.
That's 10 ayes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We're ready for the next case, Dr. Pritchard.
Agenda
Pritchard?
item, yes.
I just wanted to let you know the applicant for number 6 has joined us.
Would you like to go back now, Mr. Whitehead, to number 6?
Yes, ma'am, because I think we have a few callers in opposition
All right.
who are probably patiently waiting.
All right. Agenda item number 6, MJR 21-004, correspondence to PD 03-328, Northeast Memphis, a modification to uses to allow auto repair and tire sales on the west side of Sycamore View, south of Raleigh LaGrange. Staff recommendation is rejection.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchard. Okay, since there is a rejection and we have opposition, we will hear the staff report at this time.
Good morning, Chairwoman and members of the board. This is Lucas Skinner with the Division of Planning and Development. Again, this is case MJR 21-004, which again is a correspondence to PD 03-328. And again, the request is for an auto repair shop with tire sales. This is located on the west side of Sycamore View Road at or about 2045 Sycamore View Road. Next slide, please. Of course, that's not working. So on the next slide, we have the land use map. There are residential uses to the west and to the south, which is also part of the same PD, but a residential portion of the PD. And then there are commercial uses to the north, which is a car wash, and then commercial uses across Sycamore View to the east. Next slide, please. On the next slide, there are some site photos. This lot in particular is still vacant, and there is some existing vegetation. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, here's the site plan. And if you don't mind actually going to the next slide, I have the site plan with the elevations. So on this slide, we have the elevations show a brick structure. It's about 22 feet in height. They do have some vegetation that they want to keep to the south, which is part of the existing vegetation conditions for the PD. They also are showing a 50-foot distance from the western property line for the residential uses, which is also part of the existing PD. So on to the next slide, for the last slide, which are my conclusions. This was found to be inconsistent with Memphis 3.0. The staff is offering rejection. In case the board does find approval for this, staff has modified the existing PD conditions, which can be found from pages 17 to 24 of my staff report. That is all I have, and I am available for any questions that the board might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skinner. Board members, you have any questions of Mr. Skinner at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to hear from the applicant. If you would give us your name and address and your presentation, please.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Wes Ashworth with Ashworth Engineering at 10815 Collierville Road in Collierville. And the client desires to put mainly a tire sales store, but we would like to have some service, auto service. So we feel like it's not going to damage the neighborhood. We've given a 50-foot landscape buffer on the south and west. There's, as Lucas had mentioned, there's fairly heavy vegetation on the south side, so we're not going to touch that, and we're going to add some more vegetation on the west side that adjoins the neighborhood. We feel like it's justified because we're basically surrounded on the other two sides with a car wash and commercial usage. So we feel like we've given enough buffer, and also that our working hours are standard 8 to 6, and so our hours of operation will not be when the majority of homeowners are at home. So that's my presentation.
Thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation, or just you, Mr. Ashworth?
Just me. He's listening.
Okay, thank you. All right, board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Ashworth before we go to the opposition? Hearing none, we're ready for the opposition. Please give us your name and address in your presentation. Thank you.
First up is Laquita Dean.
Yes. My name is Laquita Dean. My address is 5745 Sycamore Woods Drive. I'm opposing this in our neighborhood because this is a neighborhood of kids here. We have plenty of businesses that are already here, that we have a daycare center here. We have kids that catch the bus on that same side of the street that Mr. Ashworth is asking that they can build this tire shop. If anybody drives down Sycamore View, this is a highly busy street. And with that business being that close to the neighborhood, we feel that it would not be conducive to our neighborhood. It would bring down the property values of the neighborhood. It will also bring in crime and other things, and being a tire shop and also a mechanic type of business. That's going to bring all types of things to all those homes that are along that backside of that facility. So again, with it being a neighborhood full of kids, we are homeowners, and we are home during those hours of 8 to 6. Not sure where you guys think no one is home, but we are home during those hours. And we just don't want that type of business in our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Ms. Dean at this time? Okay, we're ready for the next opposition.
Shamika Barr.
Good morning. My name is Ms. Barr. I would like to speak on behalf of the residents of Sycamore Trace subdivision. The reason the auto repair...
Can you give us your address? Your address?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. 5738 Sycamore Woods Drive, Memphis, Tennessee, 38134.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Good morning. My name is Shamika, Ms. Barr. I would like to speak on behalf of the residents of Sycamore Trace subdivision. The reason the auto repair shop will not accommodate the residents of Sycamore Trace subdivision is due to the fact there has been a major uprise in crimes such as murders, robberies, home burglaries, carjacking, vehicles stolen, fence planks removed behind residents' homes, media on the lawns on Sycamore View not being maintained by the city, or business owners of properties and lawns not being maintained as well. The safety for the elementary children walking to the bus stop that's within feet of the proposed auto repair shop. The daycare center, plus this is feet away from Sycamore View Church of Christ that offers the after-school programs such as the Boys and Girls Club. We have trash and debris already through this area. Now, for some reason, these commercial properties in this zip code are not being maintained or held accountable to the standards of other areas in Memphis, Tennessee. Directly across from this lot on Sycamore View, there is an auto shop that looks like the TV show Sanford and Son on a main street. There is graffiti at an all-time high on many buildings in the neighborhood with no accountability. Then there is an overwhelming amount of people begging for money in this area from the exit of Sycamore View until you get to Sycamore View and Raleigh-LaGrange. Next, the residents watched a supposed to be homeless man set up a mattress and a tent on Sycamore View near this area at the BP gas station sleeping outside and had the audacity to have company come over and lay on the mattress while cars are driving by. Simply mind-blowing. On this same street, there is another woman sleeping at a bus stop for years with no assistance with that. Property value will decline with an auto repair shop. People hanging out. Tires will be stacked up like the car wash now next to this lot with a mattress and a tire on it. Yes, we have asked for assistance with this now. No assistance at this time. I have not heard anyone wanting an auto repair shop directly behind their homes or have this type of business enter a neighborhood where residents are already living in fear. Now, before purchasing this subdivision, residents were told that there would never be anything built on the property because it was too close to residents' homes. It is a beautiful thing to start a business, but this area cannot take anything near the residents' home. We have reached out to 311, to the mayor's office, state representative, to the governor's office, and it seems like these concerns are simply falling on blind eyes and deaf ears. You would think this area would be one of the nicest looking areas since this is near the main campus of Southwest Tennessee Community College and is so heavily promoted in the Mid-South and all the surrounding areas to the 10. The reason why this area does not want this is because we are right next to Bartlett, Tennessee, and we think that it should have a reflection and look the same, but it does not. The only reason that can be concluded that this area is the people we elect are not holding people accountable until there is election time. So no area has to decline like this area, but the reason this area is declining is that no one wants to hold anyone accountable. Therefore, the residents ask that you do not allow an auto repair shop to enter the neighborhood. We need your help today, and we thank you so kindly for listening to our voices respectfully, the residents.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barr. We'll hear
Yes,
from the
ma'am.
opposers before we see if there's any question from the board from the opposers. Next opposer, James and Cheryl Lawson. Are they on the line?
Good morning. I'm Cheryl Lawson, and I'm at 5744 Sycamore Woods Drive, right here on the corner. And my greatest concern is the noise factor there. And then I heard him say something about a wall being built. That's still not, I don't think, would be enough to reduce the noise. Whenever there is a noisy situation in this area, because this subdivision is so small, the sound echoes all through. The nature of an auto repair shop is noisy because of the machines and equipment used to repair the cars and customers in and out leaving the shop all times of day and night. I know he said his hours would be, but I took upon myself to go through some other neighborhoods, especially from off of Stage Road, like starting from Coleman Road down to Brunswick Road, and just rode around in those communities, some small resident areas, and you don't see anything like what these people are proposing for this community. I'm also concerned that because our large bedroom windows and kitchen windows on the back of our home, that gives more access to criminals coming across those, because they've come across our fences already. We have wooden fences up along this way facing, I don't know what direction it would be, but we've already had problems with people coming over the fences. So we know what they would do otherwise if we've got a tire shop there that's going to bring in more different kinds of people, which would include some as gangs. We know that gangs center around places like this with their gangster mobiles, and this would cause a problem, especially for us and for myself as an older resident in this area, senior resident, I would say. I have health conditions, mainly, and not only myself, but there are others that we're home all day long. and I have suffered with migraines, have another person that suffered with migraines in this area, and noises and smells. And we know that when tires are involved in any kind of business like this, you end up with old tires thrown to the side.
Okay, looks like she's been cut off. Ms. Lawson?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, are you finished?
No, I'm not finished, but is my time up?
No, go ahead. Well, we got one more to speak, and I don't know how much time they have, but go ahead. I couldn't hear you.
Okay, so nobody heard me?
Yeah, we heard you, but you cut
Okay.
off for a minute. Go ahead.
All right, I'm just concerned that other residents in other communities like this, you don't find they don't have this problem with a tire shop or auto shop. And there are more suitable areas for this kind of business. And I think it's very inconsiderate, it's very inhumane to put senior citizens through this kind of, we have enough problems that we're dealing with now, enough fear and enough anxiety that's going on that we have to deal with, and this would just only bring more. Like I said, we have health problems, high blood pressure, migraines, heart conditions, and this would not help us at all. And another thing that we were told when we bought this property, that property behind us, because this would be just like being in our backyard, and the other people like yourself would not want this kind of business in your backyard. We have people, they told us that this property would not be used for commercial use, that it would be mainly like a walking park or something if something was put there. So we're expecting the conditions to be met and for it to be considered as you would want someone to consider you.
Okay, thank you. We're ready for Ms. Vasquez. How many minutes do we have left, Ms. Lyles Wallace?
Madam Chair, the opposition has 53 seconds remaining.
Okay, Ms. Vasquez.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the time. I know I have 53 seconds, but I do echo everyone's concerns as well as myself. Oh, I'm sorry. My property is 5737 Sycamore Woods Drive. I do echo everyone's concerns as well as being someone who owns property and essentially looks for tenants to reside in these properties. I do have concerns from a tenant perspective, you know, for the people who are residing in my properties, as well as the children. And like everyone said, people are home. There's noise factors, smell factors, safety factors, crime factors. There's already several home break-ins as it is. It continues to go down, and I don't think that this will help at all. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and just leave it at that since I only have a few seconds.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, board members, do you have any questions of any of the opposers at this time? Any questions of any of the opposers? Okay, hearing none, we'll go back to the applicant and or representative for rebuttals.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is Wes Ashworth again. A couple of items. This property has been zoned commercial since the original PUD. If someone was told that it will remain vacant, they were told incorrectly. Other than that, I can't address that. As far as the usage, we have a right by use to have the tire store. It's the automobile repair that's in question here. So, you know, we don't think it's a stretch to go from mounting and repairing tires to maybe doing some light car repair. Again, I'll mention the buffer. As far as the crime issue, you know, having gangs or having criminals around our business does us no good whatsoever. We would think maybe it would be more helpful to have some lighting in a building that's properly maintained and secured, as opposed to a vacant field. I think I've hit all the items that were brought up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ashworth. Board members,
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
have any questions? Mr. Ashworth, were you finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Ashworth or any of the opposition? Okay, hearing none, I'm ready to close the public portion of this meeting. Dr. Pritchard, can you give us a motion?
Yes, move approval of agenda item number 6, MJR 21-004.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Second for Ms. Wilbanks. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote individually.
Vice Chair Laws-Wallace.
No.
Mr. Gill.
No.
Mr. McKinnon. Ms. Wilbanks.
No.
Mr. Tolles.
No.
Dr. Pritchard.
No.
Ms. O'Connell.
No.
Mr. Fleming.
No.
Mr. McKinnon. Mr. Thomas.
No.
And Chair Sharp.
No.
That's 9 nays.
Okay, no, motion fails. Sorry. We are ready now for we have done number 11. I think we're ready now for number 13, Dr. Pritchard.
That's right. Agenda item number 13, S21-008, Willow Oaks, 2-lot major subdivision at 3989 Willow View. Staff recommendation is approval.
Okay, since we do have opposition, we will hear from the staff member at this time.
All right, good morning again, Chairwoman and members of the board. This is Lucas Skinner with Division of Planning and Development. Again, this is a 2-lot major subdivision, case 21-008, located at 3989 Willowview Avenue. I'll go through this pretty quickly, so next slide, please. Here we have the land use map. It's relatively residential with a few churches on either side of the lot. And then there are, as you can see, some commercial uses further to the west towards the major road there. The lot is currently vacant, as you can see. Here from the site photos, again, the lot is vacant. You can see both of the structures on either side of the lot. Next slide, please. Here's the preliminary plan. This is essentially just dividing the lot in two. Both lots are just shy of 10,000 square feet, I think roughly by 2 feet, so basically 10,000 square feet each. They are both 50 feet in width, and they do meet all the requirements for the residential R6 district. Next slide, please. So yeah, again, for my conclusions, this was found to be consistent with Memphis 3.0, and staff is recommending approval. We actually did not find any conditions for approval on this case, so simply an approval here. That's all I have, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skinner. Board members, you have any questions of Mr. Skinner at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to hear from the applicant, Mr. Bray. Name and address, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chairwoman. David Bray with the Bray Firm, 2950 Stage Plaza North. We're in agreement with the staff report. I know we have some opposition here today, and I'll stop here shortly and let him speak. I understand his concern. The register site, if you go back to the vicinity map or even the preliminary plan, there's 2 churches identified, one on the east and one on the west side, and they're under different names according to the register site. but since that information was last updated, those churches have consolidated. It's under one ownership now, and I believe Bishop Woodson's going to speak to that. They are very interested in obtaining this property from my client. Since we had the neighborhood meeting, which Bishop Woodson was at, I've been trying to get my client and Bishop Woodson in contact with each other, and hopefully they can come some sort of reasonable compromise on this, or sell the property to the church or whatever. In the meantime, however, we'd like to go forward with this application. This does not record a new plat. This does not create the two new lots. It just gives us the ability to do that. So at this time, I will reserve any of my remaining time for rebuttal and let the opposition speak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bray. Board members, any questions of Mr. Bray at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll hear from the opposition. Bishop Woodson, if you give us your name and address and your presentation, please.
Yes, my name is Bishop Darrell Woodson, and the properties that I am speaking on are 3997 Willowview Avenue and 3977 Willowview Avenue, where the subject property, 3989 Willowview, is in the middle of the property. I am on this call to say that we do oppose the stated construction as it's been planned. Number one, the lot is going to be subdivided into two lots where previously there was only one home there. Our church has been in the neighborhood for over 20 years. And as Mr. Bray has stated, it is under, he said, ownership. Well, Christ owns the church, but it's under one church name. 2 years ago, our churches combined to make one congregation, and that congregation is Mount Gilead, the Cathedral of El Shaddai, where we took both names of the previous churches and combined the churches together. I was elected to the 3997 property and 7 years ago, whereas the 3977 property we purchased over 20 years ago. So I knew the previous pastor. This is relevant to me to sharing this with you all because it's more than just putting two houses in a neighborhood. Our church has invested in that neighborhood for over 20 years, both of them combined over 20 years. And we have secured property for expansion, and we even had our eyes on this particular property. This is germane to our conversation, so I will continue. And so we maintained the property for over 2 years, maybe 3 years now. And under that, if you maintain the property, you can expect to get the property. Well, that didn't happen. When we look at the property, and as it's been stated, the other houses on that street is they don't have, for that size property, two homes. That's problematic. That's increasing. But my concern is if we allow this in the middle, if you will, of our church campus, which we've had interest in it for a number of years, that we won't realize that. While the owner is investing in two homes and two families, our church has invested into that community for these 20 years for multiple families. We offer, by way of just giving the neighborhood fall festivals where we have hundreds of people that don't attend our church, but there is a need for that kind of thing in their neighborhood. From school supplies, we have invested in that neighborhood, and to see any other construction other than our vision of actually putting a multi-purpose building there. We need before and after school care in that neighborhood. That's what our vision for that, to build a multi-purpose building that would allow the children from that neighborhood to have a safe place. We don't have anything like that in that neighborhood. And so I'm sure, I've not met Mr. Lott. I'm sure he's an honorable man. I've spoken with Mr. Bray, have had brief conversation via email with Mr. Skinner, but it's more than just making an investment. We are vested, and we have invested in that neighborhood for a number of years. So not only am I opposed to this lot being subdivided, I'm really opposed to any other kind of construction because on either side of that, it's not two churches, it's only one church. And I appreciate your consideration and even listening to me today. This is the first time I've done something like this, but this is absolutely needed for me to speak up at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bishop Woodson. Board members, you have any questions of Mr. Woodson or Bishop Woodson at this time?
Madam Chair, this is Libby Pritchard. May I ask the bishop and Mr. Bray a question?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm wondering if we hold this item, the two of them could get together, the church fathers, including the bishop and Mr. Bray, and discuss this issue so that everybody would end up happy with it. I'm not sure, but I'll ask Mr. Bray first. Mr. Bray?
Thank you, Dr. Pritchard. Honestly, as it sits today, if this application were not there, my client on this could go pull a building permit and build a house. And I understand that's not what Bishop Woodson wants to see. But that being said, the approval today does not record a final plat on this. It gives us the ability to record a final plat over the next few months, but there's still plenty of time for them to get together and discuss this. If they can't reach some sort of agreement on this, then my client will probably continue to pursue this. So I don't see where going ahead and approving this today really changes the situation from what Bishop Woodson is trying to achieve.
So you then would not be agreeable to holding the item for a month?
I don't want to get sideways with the board. I just so I will agree to it if that is the consensus of the board. But like I said, I don't know that it changes anything.
Well, Mr. Bray, I think I will suggest and make a motion to the effect that we hold this item so that the applicant and the church fathers could get together and let's try to come up with an agreeable solution. So, Madam Chair, I don't know if anybody will go along with that, but I make that motion.
Okay, I don't hear a second.
Madam Chair, this is Mr. Fleming. I'll second that motion.
Okay, we do have a second for Mr. Fleming. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, this is JC. Yeah, so I definitely get Bishop. I would like to kind of ask him a question about the property in itself, the primary subject property that we're talking about here, the 3989 Willow View. Did you all have an opportunity to purchase this property at any time?
I think he said that was their vision at one time. I don't know if he's still on the phone or not.
Yes, ma'am. I'm still on the phone. They muted. We're muted, and then you guys talk. So we watched the land bank for the property, and don't know how we actually missed it, but we were very much interested in it. We have researched the property a few years back. The city was cutting the property and adding weed tax to the actual property. And so at one point, the property had weed tax that excelled over $10,000. Well, the property at that time was not even valued at $1,500. So it was not feasible for the church to actually purchase pay $10,000 for all the tax fees that were owed to the city for a $1,500 piece of property. We looked at the land bank, don't know how we missed it, but yes, sir, we were considering purchasing the property.
Bishop, let me ask you another thing. Have you all had the conversation about purchasing this property actually from the current owners?
No, sir. We've been in emails with Mr. Bray and also Mr. Skinner, and he has not responded. According to Mr. Bray, he has texted him several times to not only present to him my opposition and then also my interest in actually purchasing the property for the church, and I have not heard anything directly from the owner of the property, Mr. Lott.
Mr. Lott, Mr. Bray, do you guys have any, I would definitely speak from my point of view on this. It definitely is a harsh thing and missing opportunities, and sometimes those opportunities are missed, and it's not on purpose, although I think the opportunity could be revitalized by even approaching him to actually purchase the property at a nominal figure of whatever you guys may agree to. I wouldn't see holding it up today, allowing anything to stop a purchase or what have you between both entities. If we were to purchase it from Mr. Lott, Bishop, I don't see in the future that would hold it up, whether the board elects to hold this today or not. A conversation about transactional purchases, I think, could always happen.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on the whole motion at this time from the board members? Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote on the whole individually.
Mr. McKinnon?
No.
Mr. Tolles?
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks?
No.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
Dr. Pritchard?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace?
No.
Mr. Gill?
No.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
And Chair Sharp?
No.
That's 4 yeas, 6 nays on the hold.
Okay, motion, what did you say again? Say that to me again.
It was...
That was on the hold.
Yes, 4 in favor of the hold, 6 against the hold.
Okay, so motion fails. We're ready for the original motion.
Agenda item number 13, S21-008, Willow Oaks.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is that Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have a second for Ms. Wilbanks. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote individually. This will be on the original motion to approve.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard?
Yes.
Mr. Tolles?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace?
Yes.
And Chair Sharp?
Yes.
That's 10 ayes.
Okay, motion carries on item number 13. Thank you very much. We are ready for item number 18, Dr. Pritchard.
Agenda item number 18, SUP 21-004 West Junction, cell tower at 833 Gileas. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Staff recommends approval with conditions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pritchard. Since there is opposition, we are ready to hear the case from the staff member.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much. Teresa Shelton with the Division of Planning and Development. This is a case SUP 21-04, of course, for a special use permit for 170-foot mono communications tower. Next slide, please. Okay, and this just general information, located at 833 Gillius Road. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Owner and applicant is TVTI LLC. Tower Ventures. Representative is Mr. Lou Katzerman, zoning manager. This tower will be located on acres of 168, and it's also in the residential 6 zoning. Next slide, please. On the next slide, you're going to have the site plan for the location of the tower. It's kind of small. I hope you can see that in the areas, but it's kind of small to read. If you'll go to the next slide where we actually have photos of the actual site. Okay. This is a view of the subject property from the frontage of Gillis Road. We'll go to the next one. It shows adjacent homes located or residential homes located around that site or near the site. We have a view of the proposed site location. So it's going to be located towards the back of the actual property. And the next slide, we have, which the applicant asked me to add, it's a view of cell tower antennas on top of Johns Hopkins Hospital, and the applicant is going to expound on this when his turn comes up. Okay, if you go to the next slide of my conclusions, the request is for a CMCS tower within a residential 6 district. Proposing a 170-foot CMS tower on a parcel surrounded by single-family homes. The proposal will not have any substantial undue adverse effect upon adjacent properties, the character of the neighborhood, traffic conditions, parking, and other matters affecting the safety and general welfare of the community. Also noted, on October 9, 2014, the Memphis-Shelby County Land Use Control Board recommended approval to allow the 170-foot monopole communications tower, case number SUP 14-233, and where it was approved by City Council on February 3rd, 2015. Next slide. Okay, on the next slide are my recommendation for approval with the following conditions. These following conditions were from the previous case back in 2014. I kept them the same. Just noting, the tower will be constructed within 2 years of approval by the Memphis City Council, and the Land Use Control Board may grant a time extension through the applicant filing a correspondence item, application with public notice sent to all property owners within 500 feet of the property. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my staff report. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Board members, do you have any questions of Ms. Shelton at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to hear from the applicant, Mr. Katzerman. Mr. Lou Katzerman, ready?
Madam Chair, Jeffrey Penzus. I'm in email discussions with Lou. He's having problems connecting to the call right now.
Okay, so what do we do? Do we hear from the opposition, or do we go to the last case? Mr. Whitehead.
Madam Chair, since I think part of Mr. Katzerman's presentation will need to be in response to some of the testimony from the other side, we should probably go to the final case and then come back to this case and just skip the staff report and go straight to the applicant.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Madam Chair, do you want me to call case 20?
Yes, ma'am, please.
I call agenda item number 20, VEHD, VECA, Establishment of the Valentine Evergreen Historic Overlay Landmarks District. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, thank you. Since there is opposition to this particular case, we are ready to hear from the staff. Mr. Ragsdale?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Brett Ragsdale with the Division of Planning and Development, and I will be having a short presentation here, and then the applicant has a more detailed presentation about some of the more specifics. This is an application for the designation of a new historic overlay district with boundaries, and I will have a map later, so I'll show that. And the applicants are Andy Kitzinger and Susie Askew, representing the neighborhoods and representatives of that neighborhood. This is a location map showing the proximity of the area within the city. It is within the loop on the north side of Midtown. This is a map showing the rough boundaries of the district. On the west is Watkins, which is also Cleveland. And as you go along the north, Cypress Creek is the boundary on the north. Coming along the east side is Springdale Avenue, Springdale Street, I apologize, and University Avenues with a section that cuts over to the east of Jackson Avenue to Springdale, from University to Springdale. And then along the south is roughly North Parkway with some variations in that boundary. These are maps showing the zoning. There is residential single family, R6 zoning, residential urban 1 and 3, residential work, and commercial mixed use CMU 1 within the boundaries. The land use map, as you can see on the right, is mainly single family, but there are some open space and some institutional uses within the boundaries. This is a map showing the current local historic districts, and currently there are 16 local historic districts with a total of 8,274 parcels. If this is approved, and there's you can see with the red star indicated at the upper portion, the boundaries of this new proposed district. And if it is approved, it will add 3,351 parcels, bringing the total number of parcels to 11,625. I will note that there was a case that was held today that you are aware of for another local historic district designation, the Crosstown neighborhood, and if it is approved, then that would add an additional 188 parcels. This is just a couple of examples of the majority of the structures. They are the single-family residences with various styles, Tudor, Craftsman, bungalow, Foursquare. So a lot of variety in the housing type, and that is the majority of the parcels within this boundary. So the conclusions, and I've mentioned most of these. The last one I will just kind of clarify a little bit. If this is approved, then there are design guidelines that come along with the approved boundaries, and any properties that fall within the boundary, owners that are looking to do any new construction, demolition, relocation, or exterior alterations would apply for and have approval of a certificate of appropriateness prior to starting any of that work with the Memphis Landmarks Commission. So that is the basic requirements of this designation. And with that, we are recommending approval, and I am available for any questions that the board might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. Board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Ragsdale at this time? Okay, hearing none, we are ready for the applicant, Mr. Katzerman.
I think I'm the applicant for the volunteer Evergreen Landmark, historic landmark.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Is this Ms. Askew?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we'll.
Yes, Mr. Kitzinger is here as well.
And Mr. Kitzenberry, okay, whoever's going to speak first, give us your name and address and your presentation. Thank you.
My name is Susie Askew, and I live at 1875 Jackson Avenue. I have been a part of the V&E for 15 years. For the past 4 years, I've been a member of the Neighborhood Association's Historic Committee. V&E and VECA are used interchangeably, but we have worked to engage our community so that we can attain local landmark status. This committee has worked for years and have reported each month to the VECA board on our progress. Do we have slides showing? Let's see. Yes. Next slide. I want to show you our engagement listing. Next slide, please. I'm going to go on because of time. We have slides that show the chronology of the public engagement of our project. At times it's weekly, at times it's monthly, but for the past 4 years it's been consistently an outreach program to let our community know what we started back in 1997 when we got 4 neighborhoods listed on the National Register. The guidelines took us 2 years to write, and they reflect our unique environment of streets, parks, schools, housing, and churches. In other words, it's what we value. I won't read them to you, but if they will scroll through all the writing pages, you will see we took great care in public participation, and all our meetings were public. Now I want to tell you about us. V&E is a defined, large, intact neighborhood, and this year we celebrate our 50th anniversary as a neighborhood association. When we participated in Memphis 3.0, we saw they had divided our neighborhood into 2 districts. We petitioned to be placed in a district of the planner's choice as a whole neighborhood, and they agreed to this because we are involved in every participatory government agency possible to make our neighborhood stronger. And we took part in Memphis 3.0 talks and are considered the degree of change of neighborhood ours to sustain as one of the 3 categories. The other 2 are nurture and accelerate. We apply and uphold the historic district overlays as being cited as a sustaining action for our neighborhood. Also, Memphis 3.0 mentions using the small area planning process to establish design guidelines or other infill design resources to guide infill development in anchors and anchor neighborhoods. VECA has a long history of working with the city and county on action plans for activities to support redevelopment, future land plans, and zoning patterns for growth and development. In 1996, VECA did a comprehensive plan. In 97, we did a comprehensive rezoning plan that was approved by City Council. The UDC was approved in August of 2010. We like the idea of adaptive reuse of our buildings. Our organization purchased an old 7-Eleven and converted it to the Welcome Center for our neighborhood. We purchased a 1.7-mile abandoned railroad track and converted it to the first rails to trails here in Memphis. Both are solely volunteer supported, maintained, and funded by our neighborhood. We have 6 commercial nodes that are mentioned as neighborhood crossing anchors in Memphis 3.0. Most of our housing stock is single family. We have duplexes, townhouses, 2 high-rises, and multifamily 4 squares mixed in. We offer cradle-to-grave living. We have no mansions. We have no gated communities. We pride ourselves in being inclusive and diverse and dense. But the historic architecture was what drives the first impression, and with just 58% home ownership, we are alarmed that our future will be influenced by those who don't know us. Guidelines help to give the full picture. Investors in VECA need to understand our long-term commitment to the neighborhood. For years, we have met with investors and asked for these considerations with nominal success. Historic overlay zoning will help with this. Guidelines make it clear what works in Valentine and Evergreen and sets the standards for all. I will yield my time to Mrs. Lily Gilkey, our president.
So this is Andy Kitzinger. I'm at 1665 Overton Park in Evergreen. I wanted to talk a little bit about why a historic district in Valentine Evergreen, and also mention a little bit about the criteria for the designation, and just briefly touch on the guidelines themselves. So Valentine Evergreen is a unique place, and it's an asset to the city, and its historic architecture and residents are diverse. And, you know, great places just don't happen. They're made through the hard work of volunteer residents toward a common goal. And having worked through many neighborhoods with neighborhoods, and I know no better example than this than Valentine Evergreen. Next slide, please. So the next two slides really go through the criteria, which Brett talked a little bit about for designation. This is from UDC, the section 863. We meet the criteria 3 and 5. Next slide, please. Also, the UDC review criteria for land use control. As you guys know, the zoning review criteria, and this application meets 1 through 4 on that. Next slide. The boundary map reflects the 4 existing national historic districts that Ms. Askew talked about, so that's part of the criteria. Next slide, please. So this shows the steps in the process and the overview, and then again, an example of the English Tudor revival style that's prevalent throughout the district. Valentine Evergreen has one of the largest English Tudor stock in the city. Next slide, please. This shows an outline of the guidelines section, and we're going to just touch on the primary section 3 on a couple of slides. Next slide, please. This is for newly constructed buildings, primarily addresses orientation and contextual setbacks. Next slide, please. Scale of height and proportion to other adjacent structures is critical for new infill as well. Next slide, please. Exterior alterations primarily address character-defining features and materials and common alterations. It does not, none of the scope includes any work for routine maintenance. It's only major alterations, exterior. Next slide, please. The design of additions, it addresses the location and scale of additions in relationship to the contributing structure. Next slide, please. And then review criteria for demolition. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of appendix items. We have worked hard to define the flow chart for when you need a landmarks review, and to make it easy and clear for the user what's included in a landmark review and what's routine maintenance. Next slide, please. So I would yield the rest of my time, and I'll stop there, but we're available to answer any questions. And thank you for your consideration and support in recommending the approval.
Thank you, Mr. Kinsinger. We will now go to the support before we get board members to ask questions, so we won't break up the 10-minute continuity. We're ready for Ms. Gilkey. Name and address and your presentation. Who's next on the line, Mr. Penzis, in support?
Yes, Madam Chair, Lily Guilty is not in the call and the number provided, so we'll go to Karen Edwards.
Okay. Ms. Edwards, name and address and your presentation.
Yes, good morning. My name is Karen Edwards, 1887 South Rainbow Drive. I've lived in Valentine Evergreen for 7 years, and it's rare to have an active and engaged community association, one that remains a vital resource for its 3,300 plus residents now and 50 years. It's been a voice for residents and a part of positive change for its community. VEC has been committed to inclusiveness within its boundaries and at its gateways like Watkins Street, Cypress Creek, North Parkway, and Springdale. And in the 1970s, VECA worked hard with realtors to protect the homes, prevent white flight, keeping the community diverse, a value VECA continues to have. VECA and its residents want to preserve our culture, protect and preserve each and every home, porch, terrace, chimney, stone, and brickwork, because they are all valuable investments that need saving for the generations that do follow. And in line with the Memphis 3.0 vision of anchoring growth on strengths of the core and neighborhoods by building up the city, not out, VECA needs historic overlay zoning in addition to the land use zoning of our area. I ask you to approve our request for historic overlay zoning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Penzis, anybody else in support on the line?
Yes, Austin Rowe.
Okay, Mr. Rowe, name and address and presentation.
Hello, my name is Austin Rowe. I'm a realtor. My address is 910 Hawthorne Street, Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to speak briefly on how historic designations have consistently maintained increased property values and neighborhood integrity throughout the country. In the city of Nashville, a report found it could be said that according to the results, historic neighborhoods with overlay zoning in place to preserve the architectural integrity and character of their resources retain their values and appreciate at a higher rate than those without these guidelines. In Louisville, Kentucky, which is a similar size to Memphis in population, properties in local historic districts were worth between $59,000 to $67,000 more than their comparables properties that do not have historic districts. Between the years 2000 and 2007, these historic districts appreciated 21%. And finally, in the city of Memphis by Rutgers University, the majority of economic studies published throughout the United States concluded that the designation typically has a neutral or beneficial impact on property values and rarely a negative influence. This study conducted for the city of Memphis concluded the same. The economic study conducted by Rutgers concluded that the historic designation means a higher average value, a higher value in comparison to similar homes, and a greater return on investment. Overall, historic designations increased. I'm sorry? Okay. Historic designations increasingly used as a means to achieve both preservation and community economic development, and they also tend to cause overflow into the surrounding neighborhoods, increasing property values around the historic district as well. And I yield my time.
Okay. Ms. Lyles-Wallace, how much more time does the applicant in support have?
For the applicant, Madam Chair, or opposition and support?
No, the applicant and support have 10 minutes. We haven't gotten to the opposition yet. So do they have any more time to have more speakers?
They don't have any time. I'm sorry, they don't have any time remaining.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Penzis, was there anybody else on the line for support?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, board members, do you have any questions of the applicant and or support before we go to the opposition? Hearing none, we're ready for the opposition. As Mr. Penzis calls each name, please give your address and your presentation.
Stacy Pennington.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Stacy Pennington, and I live at 1910 Tutwiler Avenue in the Valentine Evergreen neighborhood. I want to say good morning to everyone. and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I've been a VECA resident for more than 17 years, and this is my 5th year on the VECA board. Like my well-intentioned friends from the VECA Historic Committee that are in favor of this overlay historic district, I care deeply about my neighborhood, its architecture, and above all, its residents. It's that concern for my neighbors that I'm speaking to you today and why I'm opposed to this proposal. The problem isn't with the historic district itself. I'm in favor of a VECA eventually getting similar architectural protection that is enjoyed by neighborhoods like Evergreen, Cooper Young, and Speedway Terrace. Rather, my issue is how this particular proposal affects existing homeowners, the time period when it is being decided, and the lack of neighborhood agreement with the obligations, fees, and requirements it imposes. For a board that usually adopts items unanimously, it's worth noting that this issue was not unanimous, passing 12-3. I've been a close observer and a dedicated participant in this process over the past year, and I've started out with an open mind on the issue. Over time, however, after more than a dozen Zoom meetings on the subject, my dilemma is that there are just so many things wrong with this particular proposal, it's hard to figure out what exactly. I could speak to you at length today about the many problems in the proposed guidelines for this district, including the lack of clarity in the required parts of the guidelines, or that I think these guidelines will be a medium and long-term disaster for our neighborhood's ability to gradually adapt to changing times, or the fact that major housing assistance programs like Habitat for Humanity won't touch districts like this due to the complexity of working through the thicket of rules they bring. I could talk about how these guidelines will institutionalize blight in parts of the neighborhood that can least afford it, or how it puts too much control in the arbitrary decision-making of the Memphis Landmarks Commission, or that it disincentivizes neighbors from keeping up their properties due to the increased hassle of needing to determine if they are required to file a certificate of appropriateness and pay the filing fee for simply doing common sense work on their own homes. I could pull out figures that illustrate how difficult it will be for VECA homeowners to abide by this unnecessary complexity, like the fact that more than a quarter of working VECA residents make less than $15,000 a year. This makes it very difficult for them to pay the filing fees or take the time off work to attend a 4-hour Landmarks Commission hearing simply to move the location of a fence. But I really don't need to go into all of those things, mainly because of a couple of neighbors that I had never met before that responded to me, that reminded me this week of the biggest reason why this proposal is wrong for VECA. It started with a kind note on my door from someone who just wanted to let me know that they had read about my written opposition to this proposal, that they agreed with me and they wanted to help. It continued with another neighbor, Lori Gardner, that talked to the first neighbor and then took the time to write Mr. Ragsdale in opposition to the proposal. Unfortunately, both of these neighbors are just finding out about this proposal and want to prevent it from causing real problems for VECA. So perhaps the best way to try to convince all of you to save VECA from this injustice in this proposal is to simply hear directly from Lori Gardner, since her opposition email was received after the 8 a.m. Friday, March 5th deadline for opposition to be submitted and isn't included in the packet. From Lori's email to Mr. Ragsdale, I am writing to express my opposition to the VECA Historic Overlay District as currently proposed. I realize that this is coming after the deadline for letters, but I hope that it will still be helpful before final action is taken. The V&E Landmarks 2020 webpage on the VECA.org website leaves no real space for any views other than those of full support. The site has a "What are the advantages of landmark designation?" but no corresponding section that with potential disadvantages. The site asks for residents to learn about the benefits, but does not even acknowledge the possibility of negative impacts. The survey sent to VECA members on January 19th was extremely biased toward the proposal, with the survey landing page unequivocally aligning love for the VECA community with support for the proposed overlay district. The newsletter sent out on February 27th similarly invited residents to email your letter of support, again without acknowledging the possibility that V&E residents and homeowners might have valid reasons for opposition. This lack of transparency concerns me deeply. Like a number of my neighbors, I initially thought, based on information disseminated from VECA, that the proposal was uncontroversial and that the designation was unquestionably beneficial and equitable for all members of our community. Based on the well-informed findings and convincing arguments of these neighbors, however, I now want to express my opposition to the proposed historic overlay. I hope the board receives reservations in the spirit of the larger shared goals. And an increasing number of neighbors oppose the proposal in its current form because we too love Valentine Evergreen, signed Lori Gardner, a homeowner and resident from 2010 to present at 1977 Snowden Avenue. I think Lori's letter underscores what I've been saying for months to the VECA Historic Committee, to the VECA Board, and the Memphis Landmark Commission. Not enough has been done to let neighborhood residents know how this will affect them, and most residents are unaware of how this historic overlay district will affect them. That is why you don't have the number in opposition that you would expect to have to this. Please consider the idea that putting restrictions, fees, and new regulations on people without their knowledge and consent is unjust and unfair. This is the kind of thing that never ends well. My hope is that you will use your power today to stop this injustice. Let the neighbors that will bear the burden of these requirements have a say in their creation during a time when there is not a pandemic raging and we can safely get together and talk to one another, rather than just be presented to over Zoom. This is the 50th anniversary of VECA, something I'm very proud of. The organization has done so much for Valentine Evergreen neighborhood over these years. It would be a shame if the misguided opinions of a few were cast into law and begin to undo all that good work. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak and the chance to let another neighbor be heard. I'm asking this board to say no to this proposal today, not to block the proposal forever, but to allow more neighborhood involvement in this historic overlay district that will directly affect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pennington. Okay, Mr. Penzis, do we have anybody else in opposition on the line?
Yes, Madam Chair. Belinda Campbell.
Okay, Ms. Campbell, if you give your name and address and your presentation.
Yes, my pleasure, and thank you. Belinda Campbell, 1766 Greenview Circle, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Evergreen Gardens and the Evergreen Gardens Club and homeowners living on Greenview Circle, Memphis, Tennessee 38108. Greenview Circle sits on top of and runs along the north side of Cypress Creek. Mr. Ragsdale, if you have that snippet picture there that you had sent earlier, that would be great to show to the audience there. To issue for what is being done here, the certificates of appropriateness with the real intent to preserve properties with historical, cultural, architectural, and geographic significance, and to promote historic preservation within the city of Memphis, puts Greenview Circle at the top of the list. Inclusion is what we have here, and I thank the gentleman before me in bringing out some very significant points and having a presence and a clarity on the beginning plans and the full plans of what is at stake here. It has been mentioned to me about how large the area is already. My question is, how adequate is the area already? And is it beneficial to all concerned is the question as well. Just this morning, Mr. Ragsdale mentioned about the consideration of an additional area for conclusion. Well, if any area should be considered for inclusion, it should be Greenview Circle. When you talk about the size of things and the adequacy of things, when you deliver a large 10-pound baby, do you cut off the foot and leave it in the womb because the baby is too large? Of course not. To have a safe and affordable home is one of the basic requisites of life and a key to individual and family health and well-being is the foundation for sustainable, economical, vibrant, and diverse neighborhoods. When you talk about historic, just here, March the 1st, the Federal Housing Finance Agency has doubled to $1 billion being added to the Housing Trust Fund and the Capital Magnet Fund. And to talk about the Habitat for Humanity, who would not even come into an area like ours because of all those complexities, and they're not able to do the great work that they do, not for just brand new homeowners, but also for our seniors. Historic, Greenview Circle is quite historic in that our presence has been here since the early 1950s. We have original homeowners that represent 3+ generations. It's both notable in that the contributions to this community both in a neighborhood and community and economic development, ranges from postal workers, teachers, engineers, a Tuskegee airman, a sitting judge, and so many that to be celebrated, mechanics, and the list is quite long. And it's quite interesting that we have made requests time and time again to be included as a part of what all is going on when you consider that the creek is a waterway that has been devastating to Greenview Circle, in that when all the toxins were dumped onto the land of our properties in our backyards, that we have health issues and people that died of things that we still don't know what the cause were. And then you have the companies to come
Madam
in
Chair,
and...
opposition has 30 seconds remaining.
I would like to jump to the point of that we would like to be included and have consideration for what is being brought to play, and that the if the Cypress Creek is a part of it, we have to be a part of it, and the contributions that we have made here.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Penzis, anybody else on the line, even though time is up for opposition?
Yes, Madam Chair. There's both Floyd Rogers and Byron Strong on the line.
Okay, well, we'll give them 30 seconds each.
Okay. Floyd Rogers?
Yes, I'm Floyd Rogers at 1721 Greenview Circle. I also have an interest at 1776 Greenview Circle also. My parents were the fifth people to move over here on this neighborhood here. This street actually was the first street built for blacks with brick homes, carports in the city of Memphis that I know of. And we consider the fact that being excluded from the Evergreen Historic Society, actually the preacher cost us actual money. The houses just across the creek from us were probably appraised for maybe $40,000 or $50,000 more than our house, simply because we are on the outside of the Evergreen Volunteer Historical District. We would like to be included, not because of just more or less from the economic standpoint, but it's more or less a racial thing that you have excluded us, because at one time that creek divided blacks and whites. We want to be, our neighborhood would like to be included, be counted with the rest of the neighborhood of Evergreen Valentine neighborhood, because our children went to Valentine school, and we anything that affects Valentine and the Evergreen is going to affect us also. Thank you.
One more, Mr. Penzis, 30 seconds.
Yes, Madam Chair. Byron Strong.
Okay. Mr. Strong, 30 seconds, name, address, presentation. Sorry to cut you short, but
Good
we
morning.
only have minutes. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Byron Strong, 1787 Greenview Circle, 38108. And I spoke at the last meeting. I was actually for, with the caveat that this exclusion be dealt with, but I was actually for the entirety of the motion. Today I'd like to speak against for the same reasons, because it come to light from the outcome of the last meeting and the subsequent event. So in the interest of not being redundant, some of the things that have been said, I'm sure that people know the things I said last time. One person reached out to me, Mr. Wilder, and I responded in this and never heard anything else. But with those points being made, additional information has come to light because I had a conversation with someone who happened to be at the very first meeting of the Valentine Evergreen Association, happens to be my brother, and the objectives at that time, I think it would be eye-opening for people to hear what the original objectives were for that thing. And some of the things which are exclusionary that they were trying to bring an end to at that time are actually being enacted now inadvertently. So this neighborhood, which it only consists of 40 houses, and the Volatile Evergreen Community Association actually owns one of those 40 houses. But this neighborhood has been impacted by allowing, as Ms. Campbell said, the waste in the creek, and also the new gas producing company within 20 feet of people's homes, rendering them unlivable. Time and time again, the homes in this particular street, we've tried to be consistent, we've tried to be good neighbors, we've tried to keep the neighborhood consistent and upheld, but institutionally, we're attacked from all sides by zoning regulations and businesses being allowed to come in that harm us. The creek does run between the studs, but that was a line that should have gone away in the 1968 Housing Act. Sorry, I just slipped the name of it. Fair Housing Act. Anyway, I'm going to...
Madam Chair, no time remains.
Okay, we're going to have to call your time on this, and I'm sorry, but I'm giving you well over 10 minutes. Board members, do you have any questions of any of the opposition at this time? Board members, do you have any questions of the opposition at this time?
Yes, Madam Chairman, this is Darrell Thomas. They have caught my attention and this question may be for Josh to answer, for the people that are talking about the exclusion. Where are the boundaries drawn? Why won't we include those areas in this so they can support it? That seems to be a simple matter.
If Madam Chair, Josh Whitehead, the Secretary of the Board, this was an application just like any that we receive that we processed. So I can't speak to why the geography that was chosen other than what's been placed on the record. But to the amelioration of it, I anticipated your question, Mr. Thomas. To ameliorate this, I think it could be as simple, quote unquote, as this. If this body would like to add that subdivision, Evergreen Gardens, what it should do is remand the case back to the Landmarks Commission, and so we can send notices to the people, all the people on that street. They have never received notice, pursuant to the law, that their street would be considered. I think that, if you want to call it a technicality, fine, it's a technicality. But I think if the body wanted to include that street, that is the step it ought to take.
Well, I request that we do that. If that means voting no to this, in fairness to those folks, I'm listening to their concerns. They took their time, and I too have that concern. So I would hope that my colleagues, that we will do that. I'm not against this item, but I just want them included.
Mr. Thomas, if I may make a suggestion, why don't we go ahead and have the rebuttal so we can finish our public hearing portion, but then you or any member could make that statement only in the form of a motion.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm assuming we're ready to hear from the applicant with a 3-minute rebuttal.
Yes, this is Susie Askew, and as I said in my opening statements, our process has been long and thorough, and we remained within our boundaries that were set 50 years ago by our neighborhood charter, and Cypress Creek was always our edge. When we heard from this neighborhood that's north of Cypress in December, we weren't that aware that they were interested, and we felt like they had missed the whole process of what the requirements of local landmarks district are. And also, we know not all the neighbors know what they are getting into, so it would have to be started over again. We really think their case deserves merit on its own. It has significance on its own character, location, and cultural history, and it's not a proper time for them to enter into the Valentine Evergreen process when they have not been a part of it before. Our communication is daily, weekly, and monthly with newsletters, emails, websites, and our website includes all of our neighbors we sent notices to, but none to this neighborhood that we just really discovered had significance on its own. So we ask you not to remand this case back, but consider, and we've offered to help Greenview with their own case, because we now know after 50 years of working on this how to do it, and we've offered to help them with their own case. But we request that we remain within our boundaries that we've had for 50 years and go forward with our case. Thank you.
Let me add.
Anybody else on the applicant side for the 3 minutes?
Yes, this is Andy Kitzinger. I'd like to add to what Ms. Askew had mentioned. When you're looking at a district, you look for natural edges, and the creek is a natural northern edge for the neighborhood. But throughout this process, this has been a 4-year process. During the landmarks review, we talked about it and actually reduced the boundary that was being proposed. We right-sized it because there were so many properties included. This is already going to be the largest historic district proposed in the city, and expanding it would add additional parcels, of course. But again, that area would make a good application, and we think an inclusionary process that includes all of those residents would be the best approach moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kissinger. Anybody else on the applicant side that wants to add to this rebuttal? Hearing none, board members, do you have any questions of the applicants on their rebuttal?
This is Jeff Thomas again. I hate when I hear people say it's tantamount to that's the way it's always been, or it's been that way for 50 years. We're in a new era, and I want to see this changed. If that area wants to be included, we're living in an inclusive society, not exclusive, and I still stick to what I'm saying. We should send this back to have that area included.
Okay. Mr. Whitehead, we're going to have to depend on you as to how we move forward. Do we get a motion on a remand, and or do we close the public portion of the meeting? What do we do?
Well, I think if we've heard, and we have heard both sides and heard the rebuttal, we probably are ready for a motion. And then the motion, if a member would like to make it, it would be as simple as remand the case to the Landmarks Commission to add the Evergreen Gardens subdivision. And by the way, the notice would only require that street to be notified, not the entire VECA area, because they have received mailed notice of this meeting, and it's this meeting that would remand it back to Landmarks if that motion passed.
Well, I move that we.
Wait a minute, but hold on. Do I close the public portion of this meeting at this time, Mr. Whitehead?
yes, ma'am, but I think the making of the motion can have that effect. I don't know if there's a separate act that needs to happen for that to occur.
Okay. So, Mr. Thomas, we're ready for your motion.
Yes, I move that we remand this back to what did we say, the Landmark Commission, to include that area.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll second that. This is Jennifer O'Connell.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to remand back to the Landmark Commission. Okay, is there any discussion?
This is JC. I think it was 3 parts in this. You got a party that wants to move it forward. You got a party that doesn't want it at all. And you got a party that wants to be included. I just wanted to state that. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it just kind of, what do we do? I mean, reverting it back to the landmarks, what happens, from there? I mean, do they still, does every side of the community now come together to talk about the inclusiveness and then hey, we don't even want it at all? I mean, what kind of conversation transpires from that point?
Okay, well, I think we vote on the remand first. It could be a yes or it could be a no, I think.
Got it. I got it.
Madam Chair, if I can answer, I think Mr. McKinnon had one a question of where to go if that happened. Where do we go from there? So the question, if this motion passes, the question for the Landmarks Commission is going to be very specific. They've already acted upon, and I believe unanimously, on the approval of this historic district. The question for them will only be related to whether Evergreen Gardens should be added. And all the public testimony will be tied to that one question. Then, when we have our technical issue, primarily notice, corrected, the whole thing will come back to this body, which can then make a recommendation to the City Council on the whole kit and caboodle.
Josh,
got it. Okay.
Jennifer. I'm assuming, though, if we send it back to Landmarks, it does give more time for there to be entire neighborhood discussion, not specifically maybe with the landmarks, but it seems that, maybe due to the pandemic or, not being able to meet in person, there is some uncertainty with parts of the neighborhood. And I think having extra time may give them an opportunity to communicate any uncertainties with the neighbors. So that pause may first allow discussion about this neighborhood that would be, or this adjacent area that would like to be included, but it may also give more time for the whole project to be discussed. Like I said, not specifically with landmarks, but amongst themselves and amongst the group that is bringing this forward. Correct?
Right. I would say, yeah, Jennifer, great point. And I'm thinking about that as well is how do we say, hey, let's have could we say, hey, let's do another neighborhood meeting? And I don't want to get too much, but, having another neighborhood meeting where the opposers and everybody understands the actual effect that this may have on them.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the remand individually?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I think we're having a United States Supreme Court moment here. If I hear that water correctly. Okay.
There's a mute button.
I think so.
There's a mute button, people.
We're ready.
This is Brown. I just have a quick question for Josh. Josh, if it was not to landmarks, in what would be the process for Evergreen Gardens to join VECA if, assuming it was voted on and approved by City Council as a historic district? Just wondering. Not saying that I'm against a remand.
Well, the primary thing, if not the only thing, that would change with the VECA application is the map.
That's right.
Now,
It's the
here's the
northern
question, and I
boundary.
think, correct. Now, we closed the public hearing, but I believe one of the points that Ms. Askew was making is the historic guidelines. Let me take a step back. I think someone's in their kitchen. It may not be the bathroom, but it is a room with noise. So I'm just putting that out there. Okay. One point that Ms. Askew made, I believe, was the period of significance. That is important for a historic district because if you're not within that period of significance, you're considered a non-contributing structure, which means you're not protected by the historic district, which means what's the point of being in the historic district? And Mr. Ragsdale, this may be the best question for you at this point, but if I know VECA well enough, I would assume the period of significance that is the trigger for contributing structures probably ends at around World War II, if not 1930. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Ragsdale?
Yeah, I believe you would be correct in the period of significance. If this is approved, really, whether or not a structure is contributing or not, it still has to get the approval. But obviously, there's different kind of a different lens that it may be viewed through. But yes, you're correct. I think the period of significance for what is included like on the National Register, which that's what a lot of these neighborhoods are currently on the National Register, and they are contributing or non-contributing in that sense, if that makes sense.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I only asked that question, and it's not as stark as I had first envisioned it, that there are two levels of review that we perform in our historic overlays. One is for contributing structures, and the other is for non-contributing. And it sounds like from Mr. Ragsdale, just because you're non-contributing doesn't mean you can, do something garish to your structure or tear it down necessarily. So that's good. There's not as much of a disparity as I had originally thought. So, Mr. Gill, your question, if assuming this motion passes and assuming it goes back to landmarks, the map is changed, it goes back to y'all and it goes back to City Council, then from that point forward, VECA, including Evergreen Gardens, would be subject, improvements in VECA and Evergreen Gardens, the whole VECA, the big VECA, would be subject to certificates of appropriateness for any exterior alterations.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's good.
Does that answer your question?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. So are we ready to vote on the remand? If there isn't any further discussion. Okay, if not, Mr. Whitehead, we're ready for our individual vote on the remand.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm going to tag on just a procedural element. We're going to place this matter on this body's next month's agenda with the hope that we can do this within the month, that we can send this to the March Landmarks Commission and they can turn it around in time for our April 8th meeting. If that can't occur, then we'll be just holding this matter next month. But I wanted to point that out, that we're going to plan on doing this within the next 30 days. So with that, I'll do the roll call. Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard?
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Tolles?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace?
Yes.
And Chair Sharp?
Yes.
That's 10 ayes for the hold, or the hold and remand.
Okay, so the motion carries on the hold and remand on case number 20. Now, thank you. And now we're ready to completely hear number 18, but not in its entirety, just the applicant and the opposition on number 18.
Correct. And I have been told Mr. Katzman is with us.
Yes,
okay.
We are here.
Okay, Mr. Katzman, we're ready for your 10-minute presentation.
All right. Lou Katzerman, Tower Ventures, 495 Tennessee Street, Suite 152, Memphis, Tennessee. Also in attendance is Barbara Swearingen-Ware and Miss Willie Slate. Originally, the site was developed for AT&T back in 2014. I believe it was approved in 2015. It is an area of need. It is an area that's greatly underserved by cell towers. If the technology guys would put up the slide, the PDF that I sent at Gillis Road, nearby towers, if that could come up on the screen, please. Show something to the board. Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of information on this, and I apologize for how busy it is. But one thing that's certain is if you look at this, the nearest tower is 1.1 miles away, and that's to the east. But if you go west and south in this area, I mean, all the way down to Boxtown Road to Weaver Road, there's nothing. There's really nothing other than there's a Levi Road, a site we did years ago. This is a greatly underserved area, a huge swath of land mass with very few cell towers. Matter of fact, I was even kind of shocked how little towers are in the area. It's greatly underserved. The second slide that I'd like to show you is the one zoning M0041. Now, this site is for a new carrier coming to town that will become the fourth carrier. They're going to replace Sprint. As you know, Sprint was taken over by T-Mobile. Dish Network is coming to Memphis. They're making a tremendous investment in the city of Memphis. We're going to be one of the first markets that they actually turn on and broadcast for, and I think that's another cool thing for Memphis. If you refer to slide number 2, it shows their current coverage. If I can get slide number 2 up, please. Hey, technology guys, slide number 2, please. Well, all right, and then you can, why don't we just skip to slide number 3, if possible, please. But slide number 3 shows a significant improvement in coverage. It also shows, without a doubt, the need for coverage in this area. This is slide number 2 that's up currently. That's current. And then please move on to slide number 3. Slide number 3 will show what the coverage in the area would look like once the tower is on air and operating. The significant coverage gains for that neighborhood, significant. It is not unusual for cell towers to be within the boundaries of a neighborhood. I can think of some just off the top of my head. The site we did in Audubon Park years ago is in that neighborhood. Perkins and Quince, and of course the Cordova Sanger Road site where the whole neighborhood grew around the tower. So this is nothing that's unusual. Cell towers are location specific. In other words, you can't relocate this tower, say, to President's Island and impact coverage in this neighborhood. It's no different than lighting up a house. You have a light on your back porch, you turn that on, you still have to turn the light on the front porch if you want to light the front. Cell towers or RF signals work the exact same way. This tower would be for additional users or co-location. AT&T's coverage is still lacking in the area. Unfortunately, without cell towers, coverage issues do not go away on their own. This tower would be a significant investment into this neighborhood, both Tower Ventures and Dish Network, and then any other carrier that would decide to locate on the tower. There has been some discussion with some of the neighbors in opposition, and I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, there is a lot of bad information, phony narratives going around on the internet about cell towers and 5G. Now, I trade on reputable and reliable sources, not internet fodder. The American Cancer Society, the FDA, the FCC, the World Health Organization has all come through and said there are no ill effects from cell tower transmissions, and there are no ill effects from 5G. Now, let's go back to the slide that Teresa had on the Johns Hopkins University Hospital in Maryland. I was up there visiting once and saw those antennas on the hospital and turned around and got a picture of it. Certainly, Johns Hopkins is one of the most respected medical facilities in the entire world. And I think logic insists that if there was a problem with cell towers or radio transmissions, Johns Hopkins wouldn't have antennas on their roof. Now, to amplify that a little bit, think back when every one of y'all, of us, first got a cell phone. It's going on 25, 20, 30 years for some people. Is there any proof anywhere that a cell tower or radio made anybody sick? The signal really is not that much different than what, I'm dating myself by saying this. There's the picture of Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland. Remember the Saturday nights in front of the TV with the rabbit ears? Same signal came into your house then. Matter of fact, when the TV stations all went digital, that 700 megahertz block that TV stations used was all sold to the cellular companies. So it is exactly the same as what it was years ago. This site is bound by trees, blessed with natural cover. We plan to add more landscaping, and we can add even more if that would make people happy. That's not an issue. And again, the site was approved in March of 2015. I think it's a good site. I think the coverage issues out there are glaring. I think the site will help the neighborhood. I think the site will enhance the E911 services for every individual living in that neighborhood. And at this time, I want to yield time for rebuttal if necessary. And I would respectfully ask that the Land Use Control Board approve our application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, any questions of Mr. Katzman at this time from the board members? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Penzis, we're ready to hear from the opposition.
Claritha Cleaves.
Yes, my name is Claritha Cleaves. I live at 5460 Fernglen Street, but I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Thelma Robinson, which that site at 833 Gillis is where she owned property on the same street. My concern, as I have spoken with many people in the neighborhood, they are senior citizens and elderly people that occupies that particular community and on that street and the streets beside it and in front of it, is the health concern that they have in regards to the 5G. I know we have had radio signals forever, based on televisions, radios, and all these things that are in our homes, but the 5G is a new high-speed radio wave that I understand it correctly, they will be adding the 4Gs and 3Gs, but the 5G is the fastest radio waves that they have in place now. So the greatest concern is that these are elderly people. Their health is already declining, and they have a great concern about their health with that particular tower being placed there. We're not against the tower itself as far as, advancing into technology. It's just the location that they have a great concern for. So on behalf of my mother, again, I say, and she is elderly as well, I'm still doing a little bit of understanding this whole process, and forgive me for that, but I know they did send letters in a 500 feet radius to notify us that the tower is going there, but how far are the waves going? And how many towers have already been installed in the community already that's going to add to the waves of that 5G tower? I know everything is about technology and it's not about the people. Our concern is about the people.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Cleese. Mr. Penzis, is Ms. Moore on the line?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Moore, we need your address, name and address, and your presentation, please.
My name is Felicia Moore, and my current address is 4898 Ridgewalk Lane. And I, too, am speaking on behalf of my mother, which is also the mother of Clarita Cleese. My mother's property is at 808 Gillis, which is just adjacent of the location of the location for the proposed tower placement. As she stated, this is an older neighborhood, and it's inhabited mostly by elderly residents. And while the neighborhood has declined since the 2011 flood, there's still countless aging members presently residing in that area. Due to the flood of 2011, a lot of the homes were condemned, my mother's home being one of them, and many of the residents were forced to demolish. Nevertheless, we still have a vested interest in our land. The placement of this cell tower in this proximity, it proposes a property value concern. It's common knowledge that buyers pay less for a property located near a cell tower. Additionally, as it was stated in, I think, the city's proposal to have the tower placed there, that it would not pose, it would not have a substantial adverse effect on the character of the neighborhood and the general welfare of the community, but I believe that that's simply not true. Aside from it being an eyesore, there's also the concern of EMF pollution and, again, the loss of property value. You all mentioned earlier that the American Cancer Society had not deemed the cell towers a health issue, but they also stated that they didn't have any strong evidence that exposure to RF waves from cell phone towers caused noticeable health effects. That doesn't mean that there are no effects, and I want you to consider that. I respectfully implore you to oppose this request and to find an alternate location for your tower. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Board members, do you have any questions of Ms. Cleese or Ms. Moore at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready for Mr. Katzelman for your rebuttal and or your statements from any of your supporters.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. From my own personal experience, we had my elderly mother-in-law living in our house for 8 years. I can't tell you how many times that a cell phone may have prolonged her life, and the fact that you could carry it around the house, dial 911, send me an ambulance, and they got there. They could locate you under the PSAP initiative. That's some fancy acronym for they can locate you within the 30 meters of the call. So if anything, with elderly residents, it makes the neighborhood safer. I know that from my own experience. As far as 5G goes, there's 3 different protocols of 5G. Verizon is using a 5G that is more like a Wi-Fi that runs almost even on the same frequencies as the Wi-Fi in your house. They are the fastest 5G network. You can see their antennas on telephone poles all up and down Poplar right now. I have a 5G Verizon phone that can run almost twice as fast as the fastest Comcast. What Dish, T-Mobile, and AT&T, they're using a hybrid technology that allows it to be on a cell tower, but it's a whole lot faster than it is now, but it's nowhere near as fast as Verizon. So the reason that we need more towers is because the signal strength on 5G has the absolute least rate of penetration of any cellular signal. If you look back to the old analog cell phones, those things would go 20 miles between towers and penetrate buildings and cars and everything else. So what's happened since the advent of the digital technology is the signal's actually gotten less strong. So it's not that we're coming out with some new technology that's going to radiate a building. It's simply not that strong. Back to health effects. Again, 20 years into this business, or 26 for myself, I wish somebody would bring me a human being that has suffered a health effect from a cell tower or a cell phone. I've never seen it. I'm sitting here reading the American Cancer Society statement on cell phones, and I don't see anything about it may hurt you. Their statement on it emphatically says that there is no evidence linking RF signals to cancer. I'm looking at it right now. As far as the notification area, we work the process. The process is 500 feet from the subject property. The community, I think it's like this. If you live 600 feet away, you're upset that you didn't get a notice because you're 600 feet away. I think if you're the 5th best football team in America and you don't get an invitation to the playoffs, you're always going to have those people on the bubble that are not happy because there's a cutoff somewhere on a notice. We went above and beyond sending out those notices. I actually drove downtown and delivered those notices in the middle of one of those snowstorms a few weeks ago. So we went out of our way to make sure that people were notified and that we work the process because that's our reputation. We keep our word. Now, touching on property values for a second. In 2016, there was a site on Old Brownsville Road, that EcoSite, a competitor of ours did, and they did one up in North Memphis as well. Their attorney, Andy Rodenstrike, commissioned a property value study with a licensed Tennessee appraiser. It is on file somewhere at OPD, and I could be glad to send somebody a copy of it. But there's one thing that study was emphatic about. Cell towers do not cause a reduction in property values. They do not. Studied cell towers all over Shelby County and a couple in Rutherford County near Murfreesboro, and the conclusions were all the same. Even being close is next door, The cell towers did not commit property values. I once built a cell tower for T-Mobile when I worked for them in a neighborhood in Huntsville, Alabama. This was approximately 2003. Those houses were $2 million in 2003. Went up there recently. Now the houses are $4 million and the tower's still there. So as somebody experienced in this business, it's really hard for me to see where the values have been impacted by any cell tower. As I presented earlier, the community is not oversaturated with towers. Again, they're underserved. So we have picked the RF engineers of both AT&T and Dish Network have picked this location to serve this neighborhood. Again, a significant investment in this neighborhood. And the residents are going to benefit. They're going to have great service. They're going to have great service in the event of an emergency, and they're going to have more choices. Dish Network will be another cellular company that they can do business with, so if they so choose. And again, Dish Network has picked Memphis as one of their primary first launch markets. We should be proud of that. At this time, I respectfully ask that the Land Use Control Board approve our application, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Katzelman. Board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Katzelman at this time? Okay, hearing none, then I will close the public portion of our meeting. Dr. Pritchard?
Yes, I move that we approve agenda item number 18, SUP 21-004.
Second.
Okay, I heard a second from Ms. Wilbanks. Okay, any discussion?
Yes, this is Darrell Thomas.
Go ahead.
I sympathize and I understand the opposition with the neighbors. Tower Ventures, I actually got to know them because I was opposing a cell tower that's there right now, 100 feet football field from my house. And I read all the information and I came to the conclusion that, unless I'm a serious giant, that the health concerns were not a major concern for my family. Secondly, the coverage where I live was horrible, and the cell towers resolved that. And I'm sure everyone under the sound of my voice uses cell phones. And the only way you can do that is by having cell towers. And they go in all neighborhoods, where they're multi-million-dollar homes and where there are $30,000 homes. You want cell coverage in all communities, and it's a necessary evil, if you will. So I support this, but I do understand and appreciate the concerns because I was once there on the other side of this, and I realized we needed it, and I supported it. So I urge my colleagues to support this tower. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Is there any further discussion amongst our board members? Any further discussions and or questions? Okay, hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote individually.
Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Tolles?
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon? Vice Chair Laws-Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
There you go. And Madam Chair?
Yes.
10 ayes.
We have 10 ayes, motion carries. Thank you very much. And thus, this would end our meeting unless we have some remarks from our illustrious Mr. Whitehead.
Not other than we're going to meet at 9 o'clock next month.
Right.
Lunch on Brown.
Okay, then don't forget to spring forward on Sunday. And wishing you a happy spring day, or spring month, or what have you. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Mary.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Good job, Mary.
Thank you,
Thank
staff.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, all. Good afternoon.
Bye.